All right. Hey, everyone. I am 10 minutes late for my own live stream here, and that's because I thought I was recording. I'm trying some fancy new tech right now, and it clearly didn't work. So, my apologize to anyone who's still here and waiting for this to start out. Um, I just want to see if there's anyone in the chat there right now. So please just let me know if you're there. Just say hi or something like that. But yeah, what I was trying to do was kind of come in hot with a little bit more of a structured spiel to come in with, just to make the content a little bit more friendly to people watching the replay after this live stream. So again, my apologies. I was trying to do right by you guys and create some quality content here, and clearly it backfired. So I'm really happy to see that people are actually here. Hi, Tony, Suzanne, Ari, Jack, or Jackie. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing your name right. Anna Maria, Anastasia, and Taylor, thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to start again and try and do this the way I had intended. And let's just get going. I do have some questions that already came in from you guys early on. And let's just get rolling. So this is how I intended to start in the first place. And let's just see how it goes again. So hello, welcome to the live Q&A. My name is Tom Froese, and I'm an illustrator and top teacher on Skillshare, where I've helped tens of thousands of illustrators unlock the world of commercial illustration. Welcome everybody watching live, and of course to those watching the replay. So today I'm experimenting with trying to be more structured in the live stream. And as we know, this is a live experiment and you're watching it unfold right now. So my plan is to just come in hot with a bit of an intro and then transition into the live interactive part. Some of this is scripted and then some of it will be kind of unscripted, and I'm pretty sure you'll spot the difference. There will be definitely some awkward bits, and I'm just trying to level up a little. So I appreciate your patience as I try a few new things here. It may work better than I thought, or worse. So far it's worse, but here we are, and let's just get into it. It's going to be good either way. So please be sure to start putting your questions in the live feed here, and I'll do my best to go through them in order when we get to the Q&A part. If you want to pay for a super chat, that will bump you up to the top. This is just one way to support this channel and help it keep growing and getting better. Of course, if you're here and you're getting something out of the conversation, I ask that you please bonk that like button and turn on notifications after hitting subscribe. Doing these things are a great way to reciprocate for the content I'm providing you here and truly help make sure it gets seen by more people like you. But first I want to ask, why are you here? Why are you pursuing a career in illustration? Why are you now working as an illustrator? The chances are that at a certain point in your life, you felt a strong pull toward a creative career. There was some spark, something that inspired you to say, I want to do that. Next, you probably believed you could do that. And so now here you are. I remember the first sparks of wanting to be creative for a living. There were many such sparks, little moments of feeling strongly that of all the things I could do with my life, this actually felt the most like me. There was that first time I had to design a brochure at my day job, and I realized I was way more interested in putting together ideas in a visual way, like pieces of a puzzle. There was that time, that first day in my computer engineering program in college, when I realized I was in the wrong place. And then a few weeks later, when I discovered the art and design department, and I saw all the work up on the walls, and I saw students sitting at drafting tables instead of just boring old desks. And I knew that's where I definitely wanted to be. There were many little moments like this leading up to the point where I became a freelance illustrator. My hope and dream was to be creative for a living. My expectation was that once I had enough education, skills, and books, things would come easy for me. The reality was that just because I felt inspired and passionate about being creative, that didn't automatically make me an effective designer or illustrator. There was a lot of learning to do. I needed to learn my art, and I needed to learn how to work toward ideas and inspiration, not just sit there and anxiously hope these things came to me before the deadline. My entire journey has been this process of having some kind of inspiration or hope, and then that meeting with reality in some way. First, I'm inspired and I'm passionate, and then it all comes crashing down. My expectations are dashed. It's here where I get the strongest doubts about my abilities, about this being the right career for me, about it being good enough, about me being good enough for it, and all that kind of stuff. With every effort, with every positive clue that we're on the path to the career of our dreams, there's always a frustration or a challenge there to thwart our growth and stop us in our tracks. Some of the hardest frustrations in my life have come not so much in my education and learning how to become an illustrator. That's actually mostly been fun and pretty exciting, but it's been in being creative for other people. And now, of course, I'm talking about clients. Right now, I'm trying to write a class and ultimately a book about giving students a path to move through one of the hardest challenges we have as creatives. I'm talking about how to step through the illustration process with clients. At the end of the day, illustration can't exist without both you as the artist and your client as the one coming in with the need for the art. No client, no jobs, no illustrations, and no illustrator. We can't deny that clients are the reason we exist. They're not our enemy. Sometimes we feel that way, but they're not. Meanwhile, it can be really hard knowing how to navigate this relationship with our clients, knowing how to be both an artist with creative ideas on the one hand and providing a service more as a consultant or a business to our clients, that can be really tricky. So today I want to open up the conversation to you and hear your questions and thoughts on the subject. I have a dozen plus years of working professionally as a creative, so I think it's easy for me to forget what some of these challenges are. At the same time, I guess this also kind of gives me some experience to share with those earlier on in their career or in different situations. So please be sure to send in your questions in the live chat and let's talk. So the live Q&A is open to all topics around commercial art and illustration, but today I'm encouraging conversation around illustration for clients. What questions do you have around this topic? What are the challenges you've encountered when making art for clients? The reason I'm interested in this topic right now is, as I've said already, I'm writing my next Skillshare class, which will be about the illustration process and working with clients and kind of figuring out how these two things come together. So please keep those questions coming along in the live chat and maybe consider boosting your question and supporting me with a super chat. Let's go. So I'm just going to check in here on the chat and just see how we're doing there. Hi, Jeremy from Florida. See all you guys there. And so, yeah, I'm going to just honor some of the questions that came in to me just prior to the chat over the weekend. That gave me a little bit of time to prepare for them. So I'll just go through those first, and then I'm going to start answering some of the questions in the live chat. But first, some coffee. All right, let's go. This first question, it's kind of more like almost like a comment or a tip. It comes from Adam Ming, and he writes, and I'm kind of paraphrasing this, but he basically writes, compared to an employed position with a steady paycheck, freelancing income can be very unpredictable. Meanwhile, while our income comes in irregularly, our bills come regularly. This is a big hurdle for many and a source of anxiety. I'm just starting out, so right now I've cobbled together a basic income from my various irregular income sources. This enables me to be more chill about books and such. So thanks, Adam. I really appreciate your comment. It's kind of a tip there, and I think you're really touching on an important point here. So the big thing is, as you're starting out as a freelancer, probably in any realm, but especially as illustrators, is, we have bills to pay every month. And then we have our jobs that come in very sporadically, especially at first. So the question is, how do we get a sense of consistency and regularity in our income? And what Adam's pointing at is something that I do myself. Is basically I pay myself a regular paycheck basically every month. And of course that means when I'm getting income from these irregular jobs, I'm not spending it right away. I'm not kind of adjusting my lifestyle up and down depending on how much money I made each week. Instead, I put that money away in the bank, and then I pay myself basically a biweekly amount. And in order to do that, I know there's a lot of momentum you have to build up, but one of the key ingredients here is having a sense of what your salary needs to be. What is basically like, what do you need to live? And then what do you want to earn in order to live more comfortably? And that's a whole other conversation about how do you set your salary and actually know what you need. And that actually ends up boiling down to your effective hourly rate. And your hourly rate is basically like the building block of how you price your work. You don't work by the hour, but it is a building block. And I do have a video about that way back in the archives. But to this point, you need to know what you want to pay yourself each week or every other week or however often you want to pay yourself, and then pay yourself that. Now at first you might have to take out a loan and pay yourself from that in the hopes that eventually your income from client work actually ends up, you know, being like you're earning money instead of borrowing money. And so you just want to get there. And Adam's just saying right now he's cobbling together various income sources and paying himself regularly from that. So if you're at the very beginning, you may not even have those various income sources, but maybe right now illustration is a side project for you. So you need to be saving whatever you can from your main job, whatever it is, and getting say 2 to 3 months worth of income to live off of, and then start paying yourself regularly from that. So that's really how I survive any of the dry times, is just like I have savings and I don't spend it all. I I kind of feed myself regular bits of income, just like I would if I were working a job. So thank you, Adam, for your question. And I'm just going to skip now to the next. Oh, yeah. Another important thing just on this point is that when you're saving and paying yourself, you also have to make sure you have enough to pay Uncle Sam or, pay your taxes. So you want to save up for your taxes as well. So the next question comes in from Navina, and she asks, how do you navigate around the "you're too expensive" part of the conversation with a client? And I don't know if you guys have ever got that. I've definitely had clients tell me, you're a little bit too rich for my blood, that kind of thing. Not that I'm, you know what I mean? Like it's like sometimes what you need to earn based on the amount of time you're going to spend, uh, based on the effort you're going to put into a piece of work, you want to be paid fairly for that. And sometimes a client just didn't expect it to be that much. And it's not that you're overcharging. It's just that some clients don't have that a concept, any idea of what illustration pricing looks like. So I guess the question is, in which cases does a client say you're too expensive? Like, when would they say that? When you ask for what you want, of course, the risk is that sometimes the client will tell you that you came in too high for their budget. You're too rich for their blood. If I really want a job, I try to make price just a starting point for the conversation and not a bottom line. So pricing a job should always start with details, with the brief. Like, what are all the things being included in what you're providing as the illustrator? It's not just how many illustrations or what size, but also how complex and what sort of usage the client needs. You also want to price for the size and stature of the client. If they're a larger corporation, you can generally ask for more than from a small business or shop owner, for instance. And of course, these are all just little bargaining points that you have as an illustrator. Another bargaining point is timeline, like how fast do they need the work? How many revisions will they need? How many options do they want to see at the rough stage and things like that. The big idea here is that when you price, you want your figures to come across as well thought out to your potential client. When they come to you for a quote and tell you, when they come to you for a quote and you tell them like right off the bat what your rate is, it may sound like the price is not up for negotiation, and it may also seem too boilerplate. So generally speaking, I would discourage people from having a price list, saying like an illustration of this size costs this much money. I think pricing should always be custom to each job and should only come after having a conversation with the client. This gives you a chance to explain the value of what you'll be doing first. And the client sees that you're not just pricing the artwork, you're pricing your service to them almost more as a consultant. Once that relationship is made through the early conversation, a client's going to be more likely to work with you no matter what your rate, as long as it's reasonable. At very least, they'll be more willing to see your pricing as a conversation starter more than the bottom line. So when a client asks me off the bat what my rates are or what my ballpark pricing would be, I almost always use this as a chance to talk about the project itself with them, to like just ask some questions and then explain that my pricing always depends on these details. The only time I'll offer a price off the bat is when I'm not sure I can or want to take on a particular client. I'll price a bit on the higher side, and usually the client moves on. And the reason that I would do this is it makes the client feel less rejected, I hope. Like I don't like saying, like, I would never like to tell someone I'm not interested. I have had to be direct sometimes, but rather than giving some lame excuse about not having time or something, it ends up being like, it's just, I was too expensive for them, in which case that's their choice to walk away, rather than me sort of saying, somehow insulting them by saying I don't want to do their job. So that's the only time I'll ever give a ballpark price off the bat. So thank you for your question. The next question comes from Lena, and she asks, I think this came over Twitter. She says, I've been just starting to submit my portfolio to potential clients. I'm looking for work in kidlit art and editorial for lifestyle magazines. So far, I haven't gotten any response. Is it easier to first find an agent, or will I also find work by myself? So thanks, Lena, for your question. Now, finding an agent is probably just as hard as finding your first clients. I can't say which is more hard. They're both really challenging. I think there's a lot of work to do, a lot more than we want to at first, in terms of just building up our portfolio and generating enough interest from the people we want attention from. So I'll maybe first speak to getting jobs from books. Like I've done 3 picture books now, and these books have usually come through my agents. I've had a few book proposals or almost projects on this, like just independently, not through my agents. But yeah, the ones that have actually happened came through my agents. And I think the book market's a really tough market to crack. Like I said, you need to build up your portfolio, which you're obviously doing, and you need to be doing what you can to get noticed and then get feedback and work on honing your portfolio to make sure it's hitting the right notes. So what I mean is, you need to be building up your portfolio, obviously, and somehow you should be finding people who are able to give you feedback on your portfolio and giving you constructive criticism, so you can develop even more toward the kind of art you'd like to be making. and making hit those right notes. So the book and publishing industry is really picky about things like categories, like what kind of art works best for a given category, such as fiction. I mean, broadly speaking, fiction versus nonfiction. I've pitched fiction books to the people I'm already working for as an illustrator. For like to my publisher, I've pitched some fiction books, and they've told me I'm a nonfiction illustrator. Like they've already put me in a box, and for good or for bad, I mean, it's helpful feedback. And it's also a little bit of an eye opener just to see what I thought of myself wasn't the way I'm being perceived. Now that's just one company, one publisher, and there's lots of room to have other opinions, but that's just my experience. Now, having an agent, I do think helps, but to get the agent that you want, you already have to show some ability and interest in the kind of illustration you want to be doing. So honing your portfolio while continuing to reach out to agents and art directors is the way to go. So while you're not getting any leads directly in publishing, you should also be seeking other categories of illustration. My work base, and it sounds like you actually want to get into editorial illustration as well, but my work base was mostly in editorial and advertising illustration. When I got my first published, sorry, I'm kind of skipping ahead here. Yeah, before I got my book deals, most of my work was in editorial and advertising illustration. So while you're trying to get the kind of work you do want, say books, you could be flexing your muscles in other categories of illustration. So whether that means you have to be doing more self-initiated projects and just posting those daily, maybe that's all you can do at this point, then be doing that. But take every opportunity as an illustrator that you get to try and build up toward whatever it is you want to be doing. And that's just a matter of looking for those holes or those opportunities in what you're given right now, to be just pushing everything a little bit toward the direction you want. So I hope that helps. I'm just going to check in here with the live chat and see. There are a lot of great, looks like there's tons of conversations happening here. So I see your questions. I just have one more pre-made question. I'm going to quickly go through it, and then I'll get to the live chat here. So thank you for your patience. This one comes in from, let's see here. Oh yeah, this one comes in from Taylor, who I saw is here in the chat. And she says I came across your blog post on large scale illustrations. And while it did reassure me of a few things, I still felt petrified sending client artwork that wasn't 100% to scale at high res. Could you please elaborate more on the topic with regard to file sizes and resolution for large scale prints? For example, billboards and printed murals. And she gave me a little bit more extra information about her particular job here, but I'm going to skip over that for a second and just say that this particular question, it's not kind of directly related to clients, but it's more related to a post that I have on my blog, on my website, and it's called, let me just see if I can find the title of that. If you'll just give me a sec. Anyway, it's on my blog. It's basically working in like large format using Photoshop. So this is particular to illustrating, not using Adobe Illustrator that has vectors and you can make it any size and it never loses resolution. As a Photoshop illustrator, when I have to make work for large surfaces such as a wall or a mural or any kind of larger surface that you're not going to be just looking at from a couple feet away, I'm working in Photoshop. So the question is, do I have to work in high resolution? Because when we're learning in school or however we learn about illustration, we're taught if your work's going to be printed, you need to work at 300 dots per inch, 300 DPI. And that really only applies to something that you're holding in your hand. It's a couple feet away. and you're really close to it. So you would notice if it was only 25 or 50 dots per inch. But if something's up on a wall 10 feet away, 20 feet away, uh, because you're further away, you don't need as much resolution. You're not going to notice when things are less resolution. And in fact, it will look as sharp to your eyes at that distance as something much higher resolution that's close up to your eyes. So I hope that answers your question. And just as an example of like, I actually had a little bit of a scare myself. I doubted this whole concept of working at a much lower resolution, and it felt like it maybe working at this lower resolution would actually make the image too blurry. I have a job that I recently did in the spring, and it was for a liquor store, and it's like on these big panels on their wall. And then recently, I got asked to send the artwork again, and they sent me some file submission guidelines from their printer, and I thought, oh, they're going to ask for higher resolution. I didn't work in higher resolution, but when I read it, I was like, oh, I did the right thing. I did exactly what I always do, and it was the right thing. And here it says, and I wish I could share my screen, but I'll just read you really quick. They say file resolution of images should be 150 dpi at final output size for viewing at a distance of 1 to 5 feet, 100 dpi at 5 to 8 feet, 72 dpi at 8 to 15 feet, 50 dots per inch at 15 to 25 feet, and it keeps going down. The further and further away the graphic will be from the viewer, the dots per inch goes lower. And the really important thing is that in Photoshop, you can't work at 8 by 10 feet at 300 dpi. You'd crash your computer. Your Photoshop wouldn't be able to handle it. So you do have to work at a much lower resolution, and if you're working on these larger format files. And I assure you that the instructions that I gave on my blog post there, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes, are in fact correct. So I hope that kind of helps you not be too concerned or petrified, but I appreciate your question, Taylor. Okay, so yeah, I mean, we're, almost at the halfway point here. So I just want to remind you guys, if you want to if you have a question, please ask it. I will try my best to get to it. Looks like there's a lot going on here. Also want to just ask, if you're getting anything from this content, please smash that like button. And again, thank you for being here. So I'm just going to start kind of reading at the top here. This is where I really wish I had someone reading, like some kind of moderator to feed me the questions. But Alyssa writes, hi from the UK. I've loved drawing from when I was little, but never thought it could be pursued as a career. So I became a designer. Now it's time to do what I've always dreamt of. Not now. If not now, then when? That's a really good question, right? Like, when are you going to be ready? If you can do it right now and just jump into it, then go for it. So her question is, do you have thoughts or tips on getting an illustration agent, especially if you're starting out as a freelance illustrator? So I talked a little bit about agents already, but my experience with agents is going to be different than anyone else's. So going back probably to 2013, that's when I kind of wanted to start freelance illustrating. I was working as a designer. That was where I was getting clients. I wasn't known too well as an illustrator at this point. I was getting a few jobs, but not a ton. But I knew I had enough illustration under my belt to have something of a portfolio. What I ended up doing was creating a really special postcard. I letterpressed it, and I researched the agent. I researched, I mean, there's so many agencies out there, so many reps, and I just, I knew it was important not to just try and get any old agent. Like, I needed to find an agent that had work in their roster of illustrators that looked like the kind of group I wanted to be a part of, right? You want to find an agent whose roster of illustrators looks like the family you want to be a part of. You want to be able to fit in, but you also want within that to have something unique that they don't have yet. So something within the same taste category while also being unique. That's a really important thing. So what I did was I found, I believe, 5 or 6 agencies that I really thought were cool. And I hand wrote these letterpress postcards. I made it very as personal as I could, and to the I found out who the main contacts at these places were, and then I sent them. And astonishingly, I had two offers come back, and I don't know how common that is, but I kind of just chalk it up to I kind of just found the people that I like. It's almost like I custom tailored these postcards to these agents, and there was already something in the way these postcards looked and the way my art was to these agents that resonated with them. Like, they resonated with me, I resonated with them. I think that's really important. Now, I don't know how similar this experience will be for everyone, but all I can say is, based on my experience, it's really important to custom tailor your messaging, make sure that what you're sending looks like something they're looking for, and make it as special as you can. Stand out. For me, I believe I stood out above glossy, more like traditional postcards that illustrators were sending at the time. I still actually think sending postcards of some kind is really important. Just make it something that you believe your agent would be excited to actually keep. Like, make it something they would hate to throw out, something even that they might want to put up on, in their cubicle or wherever agents work. So that would be my best advice for finding an agent. And I do know that it can be tricky. Just make sure that if you're not getting the response that you want, you can do things like portfolio reviews to get feedback on your work. I know that 3x3 magazine does that. If you go to 3x3.com, I think is the URL, they do portfolio reviews, and you pay, and they give you like a half-hour review with someone in the industry, and they'll give you sometimes very direct and hard to swallow feedback, but it's all good, and it helps you grow as an illustrator and kind of know what people on the inside are thinking about work like yours. So thank you for your question, Alyssa. So Jeremy Gordon says, where do you find clients? Oh, wait. He says, where to find clients is a question I often have, whether it's worth it to try working with a rep. So this is another question about, how to get work. Do you get it independently or with a rep? While you're not getting, I think actually getting a rep, an agent on your side, is a really good thing. I also think that along the way, there's this phase where you're going to be taking on whatever projects you can with or without a rep. And so that might mean working on a friend's band's posters, whatever kind of little jobs you can get. Might be with a mom and pop shop, some things that you might actually not find that exciting at this point. But it's what you do with those little unexciting opportunities to make those as exciting and interesting as possible, where your portfolio starts to build up, you gain that real world experience, and then you can talk about those things when you're trying to, woo your favorite art rep or agent. So thank you for your question, Jeremy. Jackie says, I've been curious about the best ways to approach creative directors in finding new illustration opportunities, assuming they didn't find you first. So it's a really good question. And I think that's one of the ongoing questions we have is, how do you get attention from the people we want attention from? And creative directors, I mean, where are these elusive creative directors? Where do they exist? And how are they coming across people's work? That's something that we need to look into, is think about the kind of people or the specific names of people you want to connect to. Maybe it's like the creative director at Target, and Then you get a name, and then you might be able to find clues to the kind of talent they're hiring. Like you, like just using this example, if you want to get the attention of the creative director at Target, find out which illustrators are working for Target, if they're hiring any freelance illustrators, and then look at the kind of taste or the style that's common through these artists that Target is hiring. You might also want to see if they're agented. You want to see if what their websites are looking like, what their social media presence is like. Doing this kind of reverse engineering of the kind of, like, you find the person you want to work for, and then you try and trace back to the people who are working for them, and then what are the things they're doing as far as you can tell. What are those clues, right? And oftentimes you won't be able to talk to the creative director of Target, right? There's probably lots of people vying for their attention. But what about one of the illustrators who've worked for Target? Maybe you can get in touch with them and pick their brain. And so part of it is like just finding out information in this way. And along the way, you're making connections to people. It's always through this act of reaching out, not necessarily to get what you want, to like get the job, but just out of curiosity, one illustrator to another, being curious, reaching out, making friends in the industry, and things happen that way. And I've been very much like that, especially early on. Is I've always, like, when there's been someone I've been interested in meeting or reaching out to, I've made efforts to actually make those connections in these ways. And sometimes you get their attention and sometimes you don't. I've written emails to art directors, even locally in the city where I live, and I get nothing, no response. And it's very discouraging, especially when you feel like, you're not being pushy, you're not being annoying, or you didn't think you were being annoying, whatever it is, they don't respond. It feels like a disrespect. But this one art director, creative director that I remember reaching out to a long, long time ago before I was ready, years later, reached out to me and gave me a pretty exciting job. And I guess that's just the way the universe works sometimes, is you plant seeds and you wait for a long time, much longer than you want, and then later things grow. And the important thing is to never stop reaching out and trying to make those connections in an organic way, not just what can I get out of my relationship with you, but more just like, I'm just curious about picking your brain and I love your work, and reaching out more as a peer than as someone hungry for, some kind of opportunity. So I hope that helps. Just looking at some more of these questions here. Suzanne writes, I love learning about illustration and the market. I'm trying to find my style. Your Skillshare course has been fantastic for that. I love your teachings. Thank you, Suzanne, so much. I really appreciate that. Jeremy Gordon says, passive income is a great idea for freelancers too. Anyone have experience with ideas for passive income? And speaking of Skillshare, that's actually my biggest source of passive income, but it's also my biggest source of income right now. Since the pandemic, my source of income has made this huge shift from doing mostly client work to, I'd say 75% of my income being from Skillshare. Now, of course, I've been building on that and developing my Skillshare teaching career for a handful of years now. So it's been some time, and things maybe are just really picking up momentum now. But if you have a skill to teach and you can make a class from it, a place like Skillshare, Udemy, or one of these other platforms, there's so many now that it's probably a very good time right now, if you have a skill to teach, to try and make that happen. I get contacted probably 2 to 3 times a week. Well, at its most, there have usually about one a week, but like 2 to 3 times a week, I'll get an email from some online class platform looking for me to teach. And because I'm so focused on making content for Skillshare, I have to decline. But that's all just to say that there are platforms just hungry for talented designers and illustrators to teach their skills on their platforms. And those are all passive income opportunities. And another passive income opportunity that I'm trying to build up is, of course, this channel, and making it as good of a resource for new and aspiring illustrators as possible. So providing that value, and hopefully eventually seeing some returns on that in various ways. It might be directly through ad income, or maybe just through some opportunity that comes from just being present and showing up later on. So Suzanne actually responds to Jeremy. She says, I've heard licensing is great for money. And a case in point for licensing is I did some greeting cards for Papyrus greeting cards a number of years ago. And one of those designs, a lot of them have been forgotten and didn't do so well, but one of them has had a life of its own. And even just recently, I've had a contract for that particular image renewed. I think I made another, it was like $1,200 just for them needing it for another 3 years. I can't remember the exact details, but licensing is great if you can make that work. So it is a good thing to try and have as part of your arsenal as an illustrator, is to make work that ends up on greeting cards or in some kind of licensing situation. So thanks for that input, Suzanne. Anna Maria says, I'm planning to go freelance and would like to build a portfolio, but I'm struggling with how to start. Hard to come up with ideas of what to draw. I would be grateful if you would give some advice. So that's a great question. Thank you very much, Anna Maria. This is the part of the career that's really the hardest. It's like anything is getting up that initial momentum, right? And if you think about a car, that, you have to, in order to get all the way up to the fast fifth gear, you got to ratchet your way up first with first gear, then second gear. So you got to start slow and then gradually build up to those higher gears. And so slow in this example or analogy would be, of course, your self-initiated projects. I would highly recommend, if you haven't, check out my style class on Skillshare. It's called the Style Class, and it gives you a prompt to create a daily project, basically. And in that daily project, you're working on developing your voice over the course of multiple days, trying to develop your technique and your voice. And the big idea is that, and this is something I talk about in one of the videos of the class, is that every illustrator who's successful today, if you look at their career development, especially in the beginning, they started by having some kind of daily project. They had some kind of thing that they showed up to, whether someone was asking them to do it or not. So I think, like in my case, while I was still learning, I was still in school, I was doing a drawing a day and posting that to a blog. And I think I called it Draw Something Every Day. And this became a way of working out my voice and my style as an artist, and also a way for people to become interested in me because I was posting it online. And so there's a place where I could actually be discovered. I was planting seeds. And within a year or so of doing this blog, I ended up getting my first actual illustration opportunity. And so things really do happen when you're showing up every day and honing your technique, whether someone's asking or not. So that's really step one, is you got to make art based on something you're interested in. If you want some ideas about what that looks like, then like I said, please check out my style class if you haven't. And really it's about finding a technique that you're excited to learn. So whether it's gouache painting, watercolor, or doing something in Photoshop or charcoal, like whatever it is that you're excited to try your hands on and get better at, and then having some kind of a theme to as your subject to actually draw from. So I actually just think, like, if you can't think of any ideas, don't feel like you have to have ideas. Look at the object in front of you and start drawing it or illustrating it in the medium or style that you're excited about. And sometimes when I want to draw and I don't know what to draw, I'll just start drawing my hand, or I'll start drawing, if there's there's a pencil sharpener here, so I'll draw the pencil sharpener. Once you start doing that, and you can get carried away in that, and then that becomes more than what you thought it could be. So I hope that helps. And Maria, I really appreciate your question. So Squarin says, "Hi Tom, I'm working as an illustrator in the corporate world, and I had to adapt a very specific style. This is making me struggle a lot with personal work. Any advice to recover my identity or style?" That's a really cool question. I really appreciate that. So, and this is a huge thing with when you're working in-house, like, you do have to make compromises and work in a style that kind of is given to you. And I think designers experience this all the time. Designers, more than illustrators, have to think about, like, less about their own voice and more about something more custom tailored to the client. Now, if we want to be working in our own style, we need to know what that style is. We need to know what our voice is. We need to know what are the tools and techniques that we feel most confident in, and how did I mean, that's just on the technical side of things. Of course, what is the inspiration that we have to draw from? Like, what is the particular style of illustration that we want to kind of work within? Like, who are our influences, and kind of what contribution do we want to bring into that conversation? And so there is knowing your style, but like, I'm trying to wrap my mind around this question. This is making you struggle a lot with personal work. So yeah, I mean, if this is really big, if you're working under someone else's identity, it's easy to become confused with that identity. You kind of lose your sense of self. And so I think the only way you can recover that sense of your own voice is to use that voice. You're not going to get to use it at work, and I think that's okay. A job's a job, but you need to be doing things on the side, sketchbooking at very least, sketchbooking, maybe having a daily project. I know I can't think of any examples off the top of my head right now, but I know there are people who work as illustrators, say for a big tech company or for a corporation, and then they have like their own life, their own illustration life outside of the company. So they're doing whatever it is that they're doing where they work, and that may or may not be like creatively fulfilling for them. But they also seem to be a part of the illustration community. They're on Twitter, having opinions. They're on Instagram, showing a lot of personal work. And this is really how it's done. Is you just need to be, you need to have give that part of you who's truly you a chance to actually breathe. And if all you're doing is the corporate work for your job, which is, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's just how the job is. If that's all you're doing, your identity will start to become confused with that identity. So it's very important to find time to give your own identity that breathing room. So thank you for that question. I appreciate that. So Ari Liloan says, how do you deal with an art director who steers your work into a direction you disagree with? To be specific, sometimes the 80s ask to make an idea really obvious. So thank you for your question. And before I answer, I just want to acknowledge we're at 50 minutes at this point. I hope to wrap up within about an hour, but if there is enough interest, I'm more than happy to go over time to maybe an hour and a half. But just let me know if you guys are in it, and I'll keep going for a little bit longer because there's some really good questions coming in here. But to get back to this question, when an art director gives you direction you disagree with, and we get that all the time. Again, it's what you do with the little opportunities you're given, even if they're not great. And with an art director giving you an obvious idea, I just take that as like my cue to step in and help bring the idea higher. I'm not going to go and tell the art director that their idea is dumb or obvious, but I'll say something like this is a really good starting point. What about this? And I'll try and think of um, I'm not afraid to come in with my own ideas, and I think that's actually it's very likely that art directors actually want you to come in with an idea that's better than theirs. They're just trying to do their job. And maybe they feel like if you think about them in their job and they have their bosses to impress and their own deadlines, they may come in just feel like they have to contribute this idea. And if they're not doing their job. But I really see it as our jobs as illustrators to come in with our own unique perspective, whether that's saying that, whether it's agreeing with the art direction, saying like that's perfect, I'm in, let's do it, or kind of using that art direction as a starting point and coming in with some more personal options, and just never be afraid to say that. If you think it's important in terms of getting your, making the art director feel like they're being heard and listened to, then of course it's good to sort of work with their idea, but and include that as one of your options. But you can also provide something that's more custom to you, and you can maybe even have a conversation before you get too deep into your sketches with the art director. Just like, set up a Zoom chat, set up a call, and say, like, I just want to hear your thoughts more about, what your thoughts are for the direction here. It would be lovely just to like talk about this. And in that casual conversation you have, you may be able to discover things that the art director wasn't able to communicate in the email. Sometimes the writing is just really hard, and having that in person, face to face, or if you're on the phone, just like hearing an actual conversation roll out, you can start to gain more insights and clues into what they really are thinking, or look for your way into that conversation to make that art direction more interesting. So thank you very much for your question. Let's see here. Okay, Ari continues, but there is such a thin line between communicating clearly and assuming the audience is stupid and tasteless. Okay, so yeah, I see what you're saying. Sometimes the art director does want to just keep an idea so that it's accessible and clear. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a huge part of our job as illustrators is to ride that line between something that is clear to our audiences, but also needs to be compelling and interesting and fresh in some way. So, yeah, thanks again, Ari, for your question. So, I think, Jackie, that I answered one of your questions. So I'm going to skip ahead to Aditi, and they say, not a question, but I've been following your classes. Oh, okay. So this is definitely not a question, but I'm going to read it anyway. It's not a question, but I've following your classes and videos for a year now, and I really appreciate what you do. So thank you, Aditi, for that. And yeah, just looking here to see what the read is on people sticking around. Okay. All right, Jackie, I'll be able to get to your question now. So Jackie writes, what are some ways to get feedback on my portfolio? So I don't know if you were around a while back in today's live stream when I mentioned you can go to 3by3 .com, I believe it is, and 3by3 is an illustration magazine. They do they do an awards publication. It's a great resource in general. But as far as I know, you can still go there and like go to the website and book a portfolio review, and they're usually 20 minutes, I think 20 to 30 minutes, and you pay a certain amount, and then you get to speak with one of their industry professionals, and they'll give you feedback on it. I did this a number of years ago, and it was a really good thing to do. It was eye-opening, scary, and kind of when I did it, the feedback was really hard, and I didn't come out feeling like I was amazing. But sometimes we need that. Sometimes we don't know where we stand. Like, how does the industry, or at least just this one person in the industry, what did they think of our art? I think that's super valuable information. We long for that kind of feedback. How is our work really being received? Is it just our friends liking it? Will they like anything we post, or is our work really truly unique in some way and good enough for being professional? And getting that critique is really valuable. So yeah, I think 3by3 is the only place that I know right now that does it. And I'm sure that if you did enough searching, you'd find people who offer the service of reviewing portfolios to people such as yourself. So thank you so much for that other question, Jackie. It looks like Tony Allen has a question here, and he says, I want to ask about presentation decks. Yes, I love this question already. I studied illustration at university and this was never mentioned. What program would I use to create a deck? So I'd be curious to know where you heard about the presentation deck. I know that I've mentioned it a few times, so maybe you're referencing something that I've said before in either my classes or here on YouTube. So if anyone doesn't know what a deck is basically your presentation design. So your slideshow, if you will, when you present ideas and work to your clients. So a deck has a cover page with your logo and the name of the project and the date and the version number and stuff like that. That's on the cover. And then on the pages on the inside is your work. And you're like, if you're showing sketches, you're going to show your rough sketches, whether that's one sketch or a few options. And usually that accompanies or it's accompanied by descriptions, like some short blurb about each concept, right? It's pretty straightforward. And this is opposed to sending your work just as like a loose sketch in an email. And I never recommend you do that. I always recommend that if you want to be perceived as professional and have your work valued, even your sketches, like if you want these things valued for the amount of time you put into them, present them in a deck. And that just shows that you value your work, and it helps the client value your work also. But how do you make a deck? I use InDesign. So if you subscribe to Creative Cloud, you have access to InDesign. InDesign is basically a publishing and layout app, and it allows you to work with multiple pages and insert text boxes and images and stuff like that. It can be really quite simple. Of course, other alternatives to this would be, I think a lot of people use Canva. I don't have very much experience using Canva at all, but I have a feeling that Canva can be used for making decks. Ultimately, though, when you make your deck, export it as a PDF. PDF is going to be the most likely file your client can look at. If you send them some other obscure file or as JPEGs or something, again, that gets back into the loose work and like a loose attachment territory. So a PDF is the best file format for your deck. And what I do is I use Dropbox. I put the deck up on Dropbox and I send a link to the deck for the client to download. And that makes sure that if I ever need to make a change to the deck, before the client gets a chance to look at it, I can quickly kind of swap it out on the cloud and the link still works for the client, stuff like that. So that's basically my thought on decks. And just as a sort of sneak peek into my class, I think the deck idea will factor into it. And I know it sounds a little bit businessy and boring, but the deck is like one of your most important tools as an illustrator in getting your work approved and sold to the client, and in eliminating unnecessary back and forth, and that's where projects start to get off the rails and your clients start to lose trust in you and you start to lose interest in the project. I really believe that having a deck as the centerpiece of your conversation, like this is where your conversation happens. The deck houses your work, whether that's your sketches or your finals. This is the most important tool you have for communicating your ideas to your client. And it's the most important tool our clients have for reviewing and intelligently commenting on or feeding back on our work. I think it's just all around a really good idea to use a deck. So thank you again, Tony. You're speaking to my heart. So yeah, we're at an hour now, and I think I've covered all the questions, and it seems like there's not much else to answer today. So I'm happy with that if you guys are. I want to thank you very much for being here. I just want to maybe see if I can close off with a few words that I have written here. Here we go. So yeah, thank you so much for your questions and for being here to the end. I'll just close off by saying, if you're going through some growing pains as you learn about working with clients, be patient. Be patient when it feels like your clients don't trust you. Be patient when it feels like you aren't getting paid what you want or need. Be patient when you feel completely incapable of making good art for your clients. These things are all natural, normal doubts to have as you grow into your career as a professional creative. We start with passion and inspiration only to be met with challenges and frustrations. The only way to overcome our doubts is by proving them wrong. Learning how to navigate making art for clients is one of the hardest challenges to overcome, but it's possible. People do it. Many of you are doing it. I'm doing it, and I know you guys can do it. Okay, so thank you so much for watching, and thank you for being here in the live chat. Please be sure to keep the conversation going in the comments. And of course, give this video a like if you appreciated this content. My name's Tom Froese. Thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next video.